Welcome back. Ghana is under pressure from the International Monetary Fund to raise revenues as part of its commitment under an IMF-supported economic program which aims to restore macroeconomic stability and secure debt sustainability, among other things. The government has introduced a number of taxes and levies, including a recent levy on petrol and diesel-powered vehicles and a 15% tax on domestic electricity consumers, a move that was suspended following a public outcry. Analysts say asking Ghanaians to pay to part with more money will worsen the cost of living crisis in the country. Well, joining me for this discussion is Paul Yaw Frimpong, development economist and executive director, Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory. Thank you, Paul, for taking the time out to join us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's jump right in. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Ghana is under pressure. Not just Ghana, Nigeria and a couple of other African countries are all under pressure to raise revenues. Now, for Ghana, in the case of Ghana, we have seen the government try to implement a number of taxes. The latest being the carbon emissions tax, and also that's a 15% tax on electricity, domestic electricity consumers, which was pushed back and that was suspended. I'd just like you to just give us a broad sense of where the government is in terms of revenue mobilization and what the major challenges are.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you're right on. I mean, there are a number of on and off kind of fiscal policy from the government since the last, let's say, give or take 12 months. I mean, when we had to even go to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, for bailouts. Obviously, one of the key challenges for the government and for all governments, I mean, preceding governments have always been about the government's ability to mobilize enough revenue, which is always a challenge. And of course, for some of us, looking at the kind of economy that we have, we believe that the advocacy has always been that we should not only be so focused on, of course, it's good to increase the revenue base and all of that, but also look at the expenditure pattern as well, which is an angle that no government wants to talk about. So because you need more money because you are spending more and you do not have the means to finance the expenditure, and therefore you are forced to introduce some forms of taxes that almost always gets the public agitated and almost always getting interest groups rising against such taxes. Of course, for governments, as we know, taxes become the easiest way of trying to raise revenue, but then it can also hurt the entire economy and become a defeatist strategy if it's not implemented the right way and if the environment is not conducive for such taxes to be introduced. So if you look at what is happening in Ghana over the last 12 months, as mentioned earlier, there has been a lot of economic challenges for individuals. Businesses are struggling, individuals, households that find difficult to even survive. So if under these circumstances you still come up with some taxes that have no meaningful backed by any meaningful program as to how those monies are going to be used for and why we introduce those taxes, then it becomes a challenge. For example, this emission tax that the government just bringing in, when you look at it, it really doesn't make sense to anyone that really tries to understand what the government is trying to do. The reason is that, yes, we've had conversation, it's a global conversation about climate change and what we know the impact that it can have on economies and everything, you all understand. But really, when you look at the government of Ghana, there has not been any major conversation from the government of Ghana about climate change. What is the government's climate policy? What has they seen that they've not told the people of Ghana that they think warrants them introducing the emission tax? It doesn't really make sense. Yes, you're trying to hide behind this whole conversation about emissions and climate change and what is happening to really kind of get money from it. But really, you've not shown any credible track record in terms of what the government thinks about climate. What is Ghana's climate policy? What do we see happening? What are the changes that we are experiencing? Why do we think we need to raise this money to actually take care of those climate-related crises that we are anticipating? We've not had that conversation. So that kind of taxes really does not really stand the test of water. And you've seen again the electricity tariff now they want to reverse and all of that. So I believe that yes, there's been challenges, been a bit of crisis that Ghana has experienced. You have to go to the IMF, and remember we also in election year 2024 in give or take November, December, we go to the polls. election years
Right.
in Ghana and in most countries in Africa really stretches governments in terms of their expenditure, because
Right.
especially when incumbents spent on retaining power. So I believe that these dynamics are what is actually going to be unfolding in this year. And I think the IMF, yes, you're on the IMF program, you're trying to meet certain targets to be able to ensure that you get in the fund that the IMF has given so far. The government has been able to receive about $1.2 billion from the IMF, from the $3 billion IMF bill. The first tranche, second tranche has come in now. You need to meet other obligations to be able to. And of course, we all understand for these multilateral lending from especially multi institutions, fiscal consolidation is a very key component of their condition.
Absolutely.
One of them is the fact that you're able to raise enough revenue. You have to show.
Paul, I do beg your pardon. Apologies for butting in. I wanted to talk about wage growth in Ghana. I wanted you to give us a sense of where the country is in that conversation. For Nigeria, the government is having talks with the labor groups on a new minimum wage. Talk to us about what Ghana's experience is. Are there ongoing conversations on an increase in wages?
Yeah, I mean, there hasn't been direct, such conversations, of course. I mean, there's been, in recent time, there have been labor agitations in the country. In fact, just last week, the University Teachers Association had to call off their strike because there was an impending strike that they wanted to embark on, but they just called it off. It all relates to, certain allowances that is due them, that they believe that it's about time the government honored its obligations. There are other labor groups that believe that it's about time because the cost of living, once the cost of living is actually increasing, then of course, there has to be an adjustment in terms of people's wages, because at the same, salary base, everything is being eroded by what we experience in there. We got to a record high inflation a couple of months ago. Now, of course, it's stabilized still in double figures, which is still high compared to other countries in the region. We have the currency that has been battered, badly in recent times. It's still a bit stabilized, but still very high compared to the rate at which it actually depreciated over the period. So I believe that these are all dynamics that are actually kind of building up momentum, more like a clarion call.
Paul, now when one thinks about the revenue mobilization efforts of Ghana, just looking at all those taxes that have been introduced, one gets the sense that the government may be running out of avenues for tax collection outside of the traditional methods. Give us a sense of, and I know that, as you know, also the government is under pressure from the IMF to raise domestic revenues. Is this something that will continue? Ghanaians waking up to the announcement of new taxes. The carbon emissions taxes was a bit of a surprise, and so was the 15% on electricity consumption. Is this something that you foresee will continue to happen?
I think so. I think it's going to come up. I believe that the government will try to hide behind other means to introduce some form of taxes. Here and there. In fact, there's been a huge debate in Ghana now, even recently. I'm sure maybe it has not even come across your desk yet, which is about the e-levy. I'm sure you all know about the one that government introduced e-levy about 2 years ago, the electronic levy tax, where any transaction you do digitally, you're being taxed. It was 1.5%. There was a huge outcry out there. The government went back to Parliament after a couple of months, and after not meeting the target, because what happened was that they assumed that due to the digital, the introduction of digital, services in the country, and the way mobile money especially has been entrenched in Ghana, it has become more like an inelastic demand. So they assume that people cannot do without a mobile money kind of transaction. So therefore, let's find a way to tax them. So they introduced 1.5%. In fact, they failed woefully. They got, in fact, the target that they set for themselves over the period, they were able to meet just about 10% of that target. What it means that people found a way to avoid using those platforms, using the digital platform, the mobile money. So therefore, they lost. And they had to go back to Parliament to actually reduce 1%. Now, there's been new angles where some exemptions were given even under the e-levy policy, where when you're moving, let's say, funds from your own bank account to your mobile wallet, there shouldn't be any charge, because it's your own money. You're moving money from your wallet to your mobile money, from your bank wallet to your mobile wallet. There shouldn't be any charge. But now, there's a new wave of tax that has been introduced that In fact, this was not even brought to the public domain. You have to take the vigilance of some citizens, that reporters and media that has generated a lot of conversation. As we speak now, nobody has taken the responsibility for that. The telcos are saying, well, it's by the government. The government is saying they have to have more conversation with the telcos as to how that actually happens. So really, there's a way, and this money has been collected every night. Even as we speak now, anybody's making transaction online when this was exempted, when the policy was rolled out. Now it's not being exempted. So I'm sure we're going to be seeing some of these, kind of backdoor kind of taxes, and some that will come in the limelight that is going to get the backlash and what have you in the coming months. Yeah.
Right, Paul, I'm afraid we're out of time. We're going to have to leave it there. But thank you for talking to us, giving us a sense of Ghana's revenue mobilization efforts and, of course, what the challenges are. Thank you for talking to us today. That was Paul Yaw Frimpong, Development Economist and Executive Director at Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory. That's our show for today. Many thanks for being a part of it. Remember, we're on social media. We're at News Central TV. For now, it's goodbye.